welcome to this session. We'll be talking about local solutions enabling women farmers to access the global digital economy. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Amalia Johnson. I work with Hand in Hand International. I'm going to be your moderator today. I have a colleague, Jack Ward, who you see on the screen on the side, who is co-moderating with me, and he'll be leading the discussion in one of our breakout sessions later in the session. I'd like to start by thanking our panelists, Rosina Mbenya, Sebi Salem, and Lucy Correa for joining us today. It's really their expertise and practical experiences, primarily in Kenya, that are kind of setting the tone and guiding our discussion today. So just to give you a quick intro of the speakers, Rosina Mbenya is a country coordinator for the Participatory Ecological Land Use Management Association, or PELM, and she's worked over the last 12 years in a wide range of fields, including agroecology, climate change, and linking that to market development. Lucy Correa is a program manager with Hand in Hand in Eastern Africa. She's focusing on entrepreneurship, and she has spent most of the last decade on supporting the development of small and medium-sized businesses at a community level. And then finally, we have Sebi Salem, CEO and founder of Tenekata. Sebi has a long history as an entrepreneur and has a background ranging from fintech to agriculture and finance. So what are we talking about? And here you can see this is me and Jack for later reference will be your moderators. So maybe just to set the scene before I pass to our panelists, what are we talking about today? Hand in Hand is a global network of organizations, and we support entrepreneurs, and especially women entrepreneurs, to succeed. In the past few years, there's really two drivers that have led us to focus more on the experiences of women farmers in accessing digital services. First, as an organization, we've started a number of business accelerators, really focusing on supporting entrepreneurs to scale their businesses and establish a larger market presence. Often, that process is supported by digital services. Second, like all of us, the entrepreneurs that we work with have been severely impacted by COVID-19. So whether trying to scale up their businesses for a bigger market presence and greater incomes, or dealing with government lockdowns, we've seen a trend that women entrepreneurs have had to pivot. They've had to adapt. For many, the digital tools and services have really become vital to their success, especially with the features of the market as it's been over the last few years. At the same time, it's also really clear that those services don't really benefit everyone. As digital services become more prevalent, more mainstream, more common, more expected, the risk is that certain vulnerable women fall behind, and that applies especially to women managing managing farming businesses in rural areas. The risk is they become further isolated. The barriers to entry become higher. So the scope of our discussion today really is to look at why ICT is important, what's holding back the uptake of women, but then also to look at how we can overcome some of the barriers that women face. How can we effectively support behavioral change and uptake and use of services? And I guess end up in a place where tech becomes more gender sensitive. And finally, can we do all that whilst also supporting practices that are supportive of the planet? So those are some of the questions that we'll be talking about today. We'll start with our experts starting to answer and consider them, primarily drawing on practical solutions, often locally anchored for what they've seen work on the ground. But we're also really keen to hear from you. And part of the session will take place in two breakouts, where we'll be discussing a set of key questions really around other experiences that many of you in the audience will have having worked in this space. I'm going to pass now to our speakers. They're each going to give a brief introduction. After that, we'll split into the breakout groups for about half an hour. We'll then reconvene and go through report back on some of those discussions and also debate them in the full plenary. And then finally, we're going to suggest some ways that we can collaborate for continued change. So I'm now going to pass to Rosina, who will start us off in the discussion. Rosina, can I pass to you?
Thank you. Yes, you can pass to me. Thank you so much. And I would like to start by sharing my screen. I hope everyone is able to see the screen that I've put. And I want to begin my presentation by talking about the importance role the women play in terms of agriculture overall, and looking at the statistics, as you can see from my screen, from the UN report 2018, we can see in Eastern Africa, the highest percentage of women who are working on agriculture. As you can see from Kenya, we have 76% women doing agriculture work. We have 96% from Burundi and 84% in Rwanda and 71% in Tanzania and 77% in Uganda. So this shows that women play a very critical role in the terms of agriculture, and therefore attention to what how we can help the women in terms of access to ICT that can enable them to promote or improve their livelihoods and enhance their participation or effective participation in agriculture value chains. I would also want directly to go to the current needs that we have been able to see from the work that we have been doing. As Pelham Kenya, we are a network of organizations. Currently in Kenya, we have 56 organizations who are working directly with farmers, and we are promoting agroecological principles and practices. And from our work with the small-scale farmers, and particularly women, one of the major needs that women need is access to market and business opportunities, because most of the farmers, yes, they engage in agriculture for subsistence, but at some point, most of them, they are also looking for some livelihood from some of the agricultural enterprises that they are doing. We have some of the women doing like local chicken, indigenous chicken. They are also engaging in indigenous vegetables and other farm practices. And most of the time they want to access the markets, maybe locally and even nationally or even internationally. So one of the needs in ICT is how do we support these women to access markets so that they can improve their own incomes and also eventually increase or improve their livelihood, because women also play a very major role in terms of supporting their families to access incomes. The other thing is women need to have access to ICT so that they can be able to share amongst themselves different farm practices. Maybe it's the challenges that they are facing, or also good practices that they are facing, so that they can help each other learn. We have a case of one of the, we have a project. We have been helping farmers access funds. Actually, we have been able to issue funds to like 5 farmer groups, and these farmer groups, they are working, I mean, five of them, they are able to get the funds. And one group in Twala, they have been able to have access, sharing of the knowledge and practices on their farms. And I think this is something that needs to continue even in other women groups. The other thing is learning from each other. Women need to have platforms so that they can share with each other the practices, or learn from each other through ICT. And the last one I want to emphasize on it is technology that advances or makes agriculture easy. Women, they have different responsibilities, and these are from cultural backgrounds and others, so they need technology that can make work easy. If it's the compost making, they need some gadgets that can help them turn the compost in an easy way. If it's irrigating the farm, they need gadgets that can help them in irrigating the farms. But what are the challenges that women are facing? One of them is technology fear. Many people don't want to embrace technology. They don't want to access it because they also are not sure whether they are doing the right thing, or how they will be able to apply it. So they need to be trained and someone to work with them so that they are able to adopt technology. Ignorance, and also the issue of gender-friendly technology. Some technologies, maybe they are not easy for women to have or to make use of, so they need to be gender-friendly. The opportunities that are there, one of them nowadays, globally, phones are there and they are cheap. In Kenya, we have even phones, Android phones going for as cheap as maybe $50 US. So I think this is an opportunity for women to engage and be able to have access to ICT in terms of accessing, if it's YouTube or online videos, so that they can engaging the youth to be part of agriculture, because youth are innovative, they are very energetic, and they can help the women to adopt some of these technologies, maybe to deal with the challenges of fear of technology and other challenges, and also supporting women to form marketing or supporting the marketing innovations. The other thing is information is available. So we have available information everywhere nowadays on TV, YouTube, and even these online platforms that are all over, WhatsApp and all this. So it's opportunities are there. So in summary, I want to emphasize the role of women in ICT, so for enhanced agricultural incomes and livelihood improvement, for particularly for small-scale farmers in Africa and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosina. That's
Over
really,
to you, Amalia.
Thank you, Rosina. That's a great picture of the wider scene. I'll pass now to Lucy Correa from Hand in Hand Eastern Africa, who will give a little bit of the bottom-up examples of what this looks like. Lucy?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Amalia. I hope you're able to see my screen.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm struggling to move my slides. All right, so I'll be sharing a case study of one of our beneficiaries in our acceleration work in East Africa. A lady called Mary, who has been able to sell her chicken on Facebook. Mary, who is 65 years old, came into our acceleration program, averaging sales of 200 broiler chicken every 2 months. And that made her about 12,000 Kenya shillings in profit. But then the question of how do we accelerate her and how do we get her to scale up her sales and basically her poultry enterprise was one of the things we really wanted to work on. And we were able to do that, and we got her to 1,000 broiler chickens every 2 months and about 150,000 Kenya shillings in profit. And one of the reasons why she got to do that was selling on Facebook and on WhatsApp for business. Of course, this does not stand alone. She was also going through training and mentorship on the side. But then talking to her, what really was the game changer for her was just being able to post her chicken on Facebook and some WhatsApp group where there were buyers or common interest persons, and she was able to sell. Actually, on the slide, I'm showing some of her posts and her chicken in her farm. And she puts her number and she says when they are ready. And from that, these buyers are able to reach to her. On our end, what we did is to help her put up the post, at least initially, set up her Facebook page, set up her WhatsApp for business page, and then handhold her a bit. For us, it's about 2 months when we help her to put the post and take the photos. And then she's able to continue on her own or by the help of somebody in the family, because we understand smallholder agriculture in Africa generally is normally a family affair. So for her at 65 years, she was not able to do it on her own, but her son was quick enough to help her. Actually, you can see from the photo there that the page is named her son, who is Steve Paul, but then the impact, of course, has gone to the family business. But then what are the challenges that we came across as we were doing this? One of them, and Rosina has already mentioned, is access to mobile phones. For you to be able to do these posts properly, or even any other digital intervention that you choose to take up, you need a good phone and a smartphone. So for her to be able to do this, we had to find a way for her to get credit to get that phone. And I think that's a challenge to all of us who are interested in digitalization initiatives. How do we ensure that these people have the right gadgets to be able to utilize those technologies? The other thing is literacy. Of course, literacy is a challenge in Africa generally. For us in Kenya is not different. But and they need to have some sort of literacy skills for them to be able to even communicate with the diverse people that the internet brings to them and answer the questions and engage with the buyers if it's a market access platform that they're utilizing. And that is also coupled with just the basic digital know-how. I know it's possible for you to be literate, but then challenged on the digital skills specifically. And so for us, our recommendation is we train women on basic ICT skills, including the risks associated with it, because fear is a really a real challenge when you introduce or even start speaking about going digital, and especially for women who are a bit more reserved than men in this case. And then when you actually get to start, you have to build the confidence slowly. What we like saying, you go for tech and touch. As you introduce the technology, you also continue with the touch, so that not everything is introduced digitally to just build their confidence. For us, we provide mentorship in the early stages. We actually help them do the post, engage with the buyers, and when the women have placed about 3 posts, then they have the confidence to continue engaging on their own. And generally, how can we better deliver digital programs? I'm looking at this in 2 sides: the supply side, where we have the service providers, and also on the demand side, where we have the users. For us, it's really the small scale farmers and the MSMEs, most of who are women. So on the supply side, we call for identifying the root causes in adoption and usage, because adoption and usage are the major challenges that we face when we are working on digitalization. Find out the real why. Why are they not adopting? Why is usage very low? And when you're able to ask a series of whys and you get the real reason, then you're able to address it. So initially it can come out as a gadget or just fear, but when you keep asking the why, then you get to the real one and you're able to design based on that real issue. And then adopting a solution-driven approach rather than a technology-driven approach. Of course, every techie will come up with a solution that is very techie-driven and they're very passionate about it. But then at the end of the day, it's the solution that matters. Are these women looking for a market? Are they looking for information on agronomy? Are they looking for weather updates? What exactly are they looking for? And once you're able to offer that solution, then that sorts the issue of adoption quickly, and we are able to reach the scale that we are looking for. And the other recommendation on that side is to work with actual market players rather than providing solutions directly. And this is actually for those of us who are working in development organizations. We tend to want to provide these solutions directly ourselves, but then that's not sustainable in the long run. So if we work with actual market players, and I know my colleague Sebi will be speaking as an actual market player, you're able to offer solutions that are sustainable. You're able to work with somebody who is able to design and improve their offering over time. So when you leave as a development organization, these people continue receiving updates and improved solutions over time beyond the project that you're implementing. Of course, on the demand side, which is the users, and for us, it will be the MSMEs, mostly women. The call is to influence behavior change. You can start by using incentives to increase usage. We have tried incentives of data, offering mobile phones on credit, and any other incentive that could increase the initial adoption and usage over a specific period of time. I've also talked about digital skills training, just basic ICT skills. Where possible, if this could be a partnership with government or any other a big player in the industry, then that would be really impactful. And as I mentioned, mentorship and technical support, especially in the adoption stages, that goes a long way in increasing the usage and the adoption, and basically the actual impact at the end of it. Thank you, Amalia.
Thank you, Lucy. And I think some very practical thoughts there that I hope we can dig into in the breakouts as well. I'll pass now to Sebi, who, as Lucy said, is coming at this very much from the market actor perspective. Sebi?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Rosina, for the great presentation on this. On my side, I think I come from Tenakata, which is a technology solutions company supporting MSMEs across Africa. And how we do that is we provide them with a technology solution to do their record keeping, get them to do that on a regular basis, and know that their business is growing or they are working on their business. And then using that information to provide them financial literacy. And then, of course, provide that data to banks or institutions that are willing to give them access to finance. So when we can jump straight to the key numbers. When you look at some of the interesting information that we get is that according to GSMA and according to FAO, 80% of the farmland in sub-Saharan Africa is managed by the smallholder farmers. And as we can see, 43 to almost half of that labor force is women. And an interesting thing that comes out is that if 20%, if we increase, if we support women by just 20% or 30%, then the net effect is 150 million more people will move out of the poverty line. So that shows you will be lifted out of hunger. And that's a critical number that I think needs a lot of work to be done on. Just to see, just a small increment of 20% still affects a very big number of people that will be uplifted from sleeping hungry. Then there are around 495 million mobile subscribers in this region, and the ones who are using internet, of course, are 303. So lastly, when you look at 58% of women use mobile internet. So this is according to the Mobile Gender Gap report for last year.
Welcome back, everyone. I think slowly it takes a little while for the system, but I think most of our participants are back now. I hope it was a good discussion in the breakout rooms. I think we touched on a lot. I know it was a tight amount of time, but as I said at the beginning of the session, we see this in many ways as a start to a conversation. So this session is hopefully one of many. Jack, shall I pass to you? Do you want to report back from your discussion first?
That'd be great. So together with myself and Lucy and Sebi, we discussed three key interlinking points that really are crucial to enabling women farmers to uptake digital services and ICT solutions en masse. We focused really on market linkage and financial inclusion and business skills specific tools. And we talked about initially what were the key drivers of uptake of ICT and digital services in agriculture, especially for women. We talked about understanding the benefits and enabling people to understand why you would use these solutions and tools and the appropriate sharing of successes, peer-to-peer as well as NGO to peer. We found that it was key to understand what designers need to adopt. Specifically, what do UI and user experience designers need to address and need to understand about the realities of women farmers to create their digital products and services. Sebi highlighted that reliability of infrastructure is also key. And Lucy made sure to highlight that women thriving groups. We see this every day hand in hand through our self-help group savings model, where women come together, save and apply their savings onto developing farm businesses. We heard from panelists who'd had similar experience where digitizing those savings groups through different platforms had enabled savings of time, reduced amounts of meetings, and increased amounts of savings being distributed, and fundamentally more time saved for farm. And again, we have felt that designers and CEOs of companies like Sebi's must understand that tech and touch go hand in hand. that it's all well and good having your product and your service, but having people to go out and introduce those services on the ground to rural communities is absolutely key. We discussed significant barriers in women's adoption of technology in agriculture, specifically in rural areas. And we also discussed how companies and designers can overcome and address these barriers when designing their products. Again, focusing on user experience, user interface, but also acknowledging that, and this is a point one of our panelists gave that I thought was great, was that tech includes low-tech solutions. We're focusing heavily on ICT, but the idea that radio, big old speakers in the back of trucks going through communities still count as ICT, still count as tech, and they're still incredibly effective at spreading messages and information. There was, again, another good point with the same contributor to acknowledge cost of accessing digital services. The capacity needed to address and use these services must be instilled, and content, what is actually being delivered by the services. Combining these three key kind of points and key really themes and thoughts are crucial to enabling full access to the benefits of digital services. Lucy, Sebi, anything you'd like to add on to that, or are we happy to pass back to Amali?
Absolutely. I think you are spot on your summary. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Back to you.
Thanks, Jack, and thanks everyone for contributing to that discussion. So in the other breakout, we had perhaps a slightly more big picture slant to the conversation, obviously, but actually interestingly, it shows that even talking about some of the macro factors here, that there's a lot of commonality. And Jack, what you mentioned about entry points, self-help groups, and digitization, I think, and the ability to bring the services closer to the users, I think was certainly a feature of our conversation as well. So firstly, we sort of looked at sharing some strategies of what's been effective, what have people seen work in practice, and we touched on a range of things there. We returned to Rosina's point around gender-friendly tech and unpacking a little bit what that means, really about making the services easier to reach for women, and much of that will be familiar in the sense of making it easier for women to use these technologies independently without support, making them low cost, making them affordable, and keeping them really simple. And that echoes, I think, a little bit what Lucy talked about at the beginning of the session, but also exactly introducing that it doesn't necessarily just, it's mobile technologies is one area, but also to remember some of these other technologies that make a huge difference, like portable irrigation systems, leveraging solar, things like that, all of which essentially start to reduce the labor burden and the time burden on female farmers. There was also a very important point, I think, around that there's still room to run in terms of making the business case for agriculture to the private sector. You know, and this came up in the debate. We also talked about policy and the fact that there's a lot of rhetoric from government that people have seen, but perhaps less in terms of tangible policies to promote ICT and a reliance primarily on the private sector. And in that frame, there were some thoughts around the idea that maybe the business case needs to still be just a bit more refined, made more clear. Why is this going to be profitable at scale for example, fintech companies or technology companies in general? And again, yes, to echo, I think just really keeping the solution simple and bringing this closer to the users. A very important point that came up, and this is when we were talking about linking also to what services exist, especially promoting perhaps sustainable practices with a view of protecting the planet. You know, I think there was also a great intervention around the fact there's a lot of space for more coordination here. More and more services are cropping up, technologies, apps. There are things that are available, you know, both in Kenya and beyond. But are we as actors, primarily the NGO space, but otherwise, are we coordinating a little bit to make sure that the services that are available are disseminated, understood, and so that farmers can have one or two services to use as opposed to having lots of different things thrown at them at the same time. Then secondly, we touched a little bit on sort of, what is the role of policy, if any? And I think that sounds as if that came up in your discussion as well, Jack, around really, the fact that policies, the enabling environment is going to be crucial to this. That's connectivity, that's access to power to allow people to feel that these solutions are reliable. So that's always going to have a role. And then also we talked about, access to energy, but also there was two angles here where we were talking about there's, as these services become more common and become used more, especially by people in isolated areas, just making sure that the consumer protection is keeping pace, and that there's a regulatory framework that makes sure that there's a clear understanding of what using services entails, and for example, the use of personal data, etc. And then we had actually an interesting debate as well, a little bit about sort of, and how does this translate into extension services? Are there services that could be digitized increasingly through these types of solutions? And then I'll wrap up there, but just very briefly, one of the things I thought was really encouraging, and I'd love to hear more, and I think that's come up in some of the questions as well, the general questions, very much would echo your point, Jack. I think we touched on this too, about simple solutions, especially when it comes to sustainable practices. So, it doesn't necessarily need to be, some of it is about hardware or just employing techniques that will save women both time and obviously reduce their labor cost as well. So on a practical level in say poultry or other value chains, just bringing in little solutions that allow those businesses to run more smoothly. And we mentioned, there was a mention as well of a number of apps, for example, now emerging in Kenya, that essentially offer some of that very tangible advice to farmers of how do you, what is the advice that you need in a certain crop. And of course, those types of apps, once established, could also be used to promote sustainable practices. So I see that there was some hands raised, I think, although they seem to have disappeared now. So maybe I might start just with, sadly, we only have about 10 minutes now for some of the Q&A and for the common discussion. But there were some questions, I think, posted through the Hoover app and in the general chats that I wanted to put to the speakers, perhaps to start the discussion. And of course, others can please feel free to raise your hand to come in with a question directly as well. One of the things that that's come up now a couple of times in the questions is around the opportunities around digital technologies to engage youth, and specifically young women. And I'd be keen to hear from the panelists, what's your perspective on is ICT or is the use of digital a really meaningful way to engage young people, and especially young women into agriculture, or is it really actually so far still a little bit on the surface? Are we some steps away from that? And perhaps I don't know if there's a speaker who would like to start, or I can ask. Is there anyone who would like to take that question?
Male, I could go first. Huh?
Thank you, Lucy. That's great.
So yeah, yes, digitalization is one of the easiest ways to get the youth on board in agriculture generally, because it's exciting for them, and it has the promise of simplifying and taking the mud out of agriculture. So for them, it quickly gets them to a space where they feel we are participating, but we are not old school. I think in the case study I shared, the lady, Mary, got her son to participate on the marketing end of things because he's able to run the Facebook page and the Instagram page and talk to the buyers virtually, and that eventually will get him interested in how can we increase on our production and how can we get our farm selling more. So it's a great entry point. I think also the information available digitally on better production practices, more modern production practices, for example, hydroponics or any other production practices that is a bit new and interesting to the youth. So yeah, it really provides a good platform for them to come on board, and even when they are on board, for them to continue learning on new technologies and ideas that keep the youth excited to be in agriculture.
Thank you, Lucy. Sebi, Rosina, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah,
Maybe
I think I can. Yeah, please proceed.
Sorry. Sebi, if you go first,
It's
then we'll
okay.
bring in Rosina. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, good. Rosina, you want to go first? Yeah,
It's
so
fine.
maybe
No, it's fine.
Okay, so maybe one just to add on to what Lucy has said. I've seen if you go into Facebook right now or into Instagram, you'd see in Facebook groups there are quite a number of groups of youth who are actually engaging a lot on agricultural discussions, and I see that information sharing. So these tools or these social media platforms really support them in exchanging their ideas. I've seen WhatsApp groups where people for youth guys who just discuss specific aspects, and they even plan visits. So I was in one of these groups where they plan to visit one of the, of course, it involves traveling to another place, which also is one of the things that they like. So as they are doing the traveling, they're actually going to learn what this specific person is doing, what kind of farming they're doing, what sort of things they're growing, how they are selling it and all that. So that really helps them to share their ideas or to do that. So I see the use of the digital platform and as a way in which the youth can engage and also pass information across and share some of the useful data across or among themselves. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I want us to add on whatever they have said, but reiterate the fact that the youth, of course, they are innovative and they are also having a lot of time to be able to interact with a lot of online platforms. So you will find the youth, as everyone is saying, they are so active in all the social media more than the elderly, and therefore they need to be involved. And as I mentioned, you see, the agriculture, it's not just the process of preparing the farm, but it's the whole value chain. For us as Pelham, we look at it from the farm to the fork. So that section of it, there is a way the youth can participate. Recently, I've been able to see the youth being able to support in online marketing, because like now with the COVID, which created a lot of difficulties in physical interaction, there was that opportunity created for online markets and engagement. So that is a platform whereby the youth can be more involved and they can now provide them their services in terms of connecting to that. So I think in summary, yes, the women need to find ways of engaging the youth and also being capacity built. Like for us, the program that we had in terms of giving farmers some funds, what we did is we were able to train the women. We took time and took our extension staff there to train them on what all the questions they had, and then we do follow-ups and find out whether there are challenges that are coming on board. And we also encouraged them to have in the self-help groups that they are forming locally to enhance their integration of youth, so that if they have challenges, they can quickly call the youth before even they can call the office for someone to go, so that the youth can help them be able to know. Because some of the youth, most of the youth have been born in this era of technology. Some have gone to school and they are able to know different ways of accessing. Like now in Kenya, we have the Infonet. So the farmers need to know the Infonet. They can know how to Google things and all that. So yeah, for me, youth is very important.
Thank you, Rosina, and thank you all. I think we have time for one more question, and there's one post in the chat earlier around essentially, I think it was sort of saying, what is the economic aspect of providing global technology to local farmers? And with apologies to whoever asked that question, that I'll interpret it a little bit because it's quite broad. Maybe a question I'd like to pose to the panelists is around where do you see the emphasis of where we go next? Is it about making global technologies more accessible in currently disconnected or rural areas, or is this about developing local solutions and really ensuring that the services are tailored to the farmers that we're working with? And obviously a slightly leading question given the topic of the session, but I'm keen to hear from each panelist on that. But I'll pass to you first, Sebi. I think as a market actor from a local level, I'm sure you'll have an opinion about this.
Yes, I think it's a great question, and I see a collaboration between the two, because technology, there is always advancements in various regions, various sectors, but when you get this technology, how do you localize it to fit into the local market? So I see, yes, there is need for us to borrow, so that you don't really need to go and start innovating or getting into ideas that you feel there is no one else who's doing. Rather, how do you structure this? How do you make it work for a local market? How do you, using the local technologies or the local available tools, how do you make that work? So I think we've seen like the advancements in terms of, we've got a lot of technologies, and if you look at the development platforms nowadays, they are quite democratized, is available, but these are not essentially being developed here, but we've been able to develop now on top of these platforms. We've been able to add on, we've been able to use the leverage on the experiences that have come from outside, so that we can build up and support. So of course, there are aspects of payments that are localized, that are being done here. How do you plug in? How do you have APIs that can be used in any of these areas? So that's how I look at it. Thank you, Amelia.
Thank you, Sebi. Lucy, Rosina, anything you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, I would also go with the starting local.
Sorry, I should have said, Lucy, please go ahead. Sorry.
All right. So I'm saying I also agree with Sebi that we start locally, and where we are going for global solutions, then we customize them to our setups, starting with just the basics. I mean, even the global platforms like Facebook, the success is really in local platforms or communities that are created within the bigger platform, and that's where the impact is being seen. So I think let's start local and build on it and customize to, the global opportunities that are there.
Okay. From my end, I think it's a combination of two, but a big emphasis on the local simple solutions, because I know globally, technology-wise, different, we are at different levels. So even if it's, for example, just a simple gadget like an Android, then in the local setup, we look at an Android phone that fits into the needs of the community. One which can probably keep more power for long, one which is cheaper. Of course, there could be iPhones, whatever, but those are technology that maybe are not maybe helpful or relevant to a local farmer. So just helping get the technologies and the ICT platforms that are context specific, and we make them as simple as possible, and try to look at the needs of different society people. If it's gadgets to do with solar, we look at the context, because there are areas that you cannot also push for solar because of the climate that is there. So combining the technology and then making it context specific based on the needs and even the environment that is there. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosina. Yes, I think that's a really important point, and I think it's very interesting, the framing of this, as you say, because of course not different services can also come from different places, as you and Lucy have emphasized around some of the simple solutions, especially when it comes to practices, perhaps are better developed at a local level versus access to capital or access to information where global platforms perhaps have a lead. Well, thank you so much. We have 5 minutes left, so we're going to start the close. And I'll just, I think, maybe just briefly give, it's been a really wide-ranging session. Thank you to everyone who contributed, and especially to Sebi, Lucy, and Rosina for your really insightful both introductions and then discussions. We really appreciate it. I think from our side, maybe just to give everyone a sense, as we said at the beginning, this is something that as a network, we're seeing more of day to day. And so we see it as a start of a conversation, and we'll take some of the things that have come out of the workshop sessions and we'll collate it into some key thoughts and messages, which of course keep a look at. We'll probably post that either by ICTforAg or within the hand-in-hand network sort of websites. It's part of our push into this area as well. I think it was really interesting, maybe to summarize, and I think it's been really interesting, this balance between a little bit more of the global view and the local view. And what's really come out for me in this session is that when it comes to the lack of access and uptake for women and what the challenges are, it's, you know, interestingly, those were incredibly well understood, and we have coalesced around those. And so it seems like so much of this is really about now finding those solutions, which is a great position to be in, that in terms of whether that's around focusing on saving solutions that are time saving, labor saving, reducing transaction costs, or in the case of businesses trying to scale, you know, bringing businesses closer to accessing finance. And I think that the other thing that's come out really consistently during the session, I find, is around strategies to bring this closer to the end consumer, and that being both some of the more general services around accessing information, but also really about better disseminating some of the advisory services that exist already around agricultural practices, etc., to really to really bring those closer to those who can benefit from them. And then, of course, I think there's an angle here that we touched on in both of the breakout sessions, as well as just being conscious of some of the longer term structural issues that remain and hopefully will reduce over time when it comes to infrastructure, access to power, and the need, therefore, as I think, Rosina, you mentioned just now, around, you know, what are simple solutions that can work locally, that are very easy wins for women farmers in particular, to sort of start to absorb some of these services and use them more, to see the value in using them. So with that, I'm just going to open to a final comment from each speaker, if I may, asking you, Sebi, Lucy, and Rosina, to please, if you were to boil this down to one takeaway that you would like the audience to take with them, or one key point that you want to make sure everyone is aware of as we close, it would just be really great to hear your sort of your call to action, perhaps, or more of a sort of summary of what do you see as really key to driving this issue forward. So Rosina, I'll start with you, if that's okay.
That is okay. Mine is just to say that we need to offer an opportunity for favorable policies and programs that enhance the women to be able to participate or adopt ICT fully. So if you are in development, if you can have programs that are geared to enhancing that, very good. If you are in private sector, you need to have ways in which you can enable the access to women in ICT and agriculture. And also, if you are in government, favorable policies and plans in place so that we can all support ICT to women in agriculture, because agriculture is the mainstay for most of our countries. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you, Rosina. Lucy, may I go to you next?
Yeah, Malia, I also want to reiterate that digitization of micro and small enterprises, and specifically those owned by women, will offer them a very clear and firm pathway to overcome barriers, both market barriers, financial inclusion barriers like credit and digital payment. So we can only keep seeking it and working at it. But then we must not forget that we have to start with the basics, where we don't eliminate the human element and we don't introduce tech as a means to an end, but introduce it slowly, and the women will be able to softly get into it. And in such, I think if we use a market systems approach where we catalyze market-wide changes one step at a time, one player at a time, then we all get to the desired point at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. And finally, Sebi.
Yeah, thank you. I think just to add on to what my colleagues have said, I think digitization and specifically the use of localized technologies, or localizing the technologies that are available will be crucial, or is crucial to the success of getting more and more women involved in this. I would borrow what one of the guys we were with in the breakout room, and he mentioned of the 3 C's. This is Gerard Sylvester. He said we really need to look at the costs, and we need to look at the capacity, and we look at the content. So I think that's one of the greatest takeaways that I've got out of this, and thank you all for this wonderful session.
Thank you. And once again, a huge thank you to our speakers and panelists. Thank you, Jack, also for your support. And thank you to all of you for joining us and for your inputs. And also, I've been asked to mention that it's possible to provide feedback, and there's a poll around the session in the Hoover app. So if you have time, please feel free to go in and do that as well. Huge thanks to everyone, especially to the panelists, and we look forward to continuing this discussion. Thank you very much.